Here's a claim you've heard 1,000 times, probably phrased almost exactly this way. The game needs balance patches, or the meta gets stale and people leave. It is said so often that nobody questions it. It's treated as a law of nature, like gravity. Of course, competitive games need constant balance changes. Otherwise, the same strategies dominate forever, players get bored, and the game loses all of its players. Except, does chess have this problem? Chess is, what, 1500 years old now? And the rules haven't meaningfully changed in centuries. There is no patches, no nerfs. The bishop has moved the same way since before the printing press. Does soccer, and sports in general, have this problem? 150 years, basically the same 11 rules, and the World Cup still pulls in billions of viewers without anyone needing to quarterly rebalance the offside rule. So here's the actual question I want to dig into. If stale meta equals players leave were really a fundamental truth about competitive activities, chess and soccer should have died of staleness decades ago. They did not, obviously, which means either that law isn't actually true, or it is true, but for a reason that nobody is stating honestly. And I think it's the second one. Let's start with the example that should break the standard explanation immediately. Chess openings. At the Grandmaster level, chess openings aren't just studied, they are exhaustively mapped. Lines like the Berlin or the Sicilian have been analyzed 20, 30 moves deep by both humans and engines. In a real sense, huge portions of the early chess game are more thoroughly solved, more known, more optimized, more converged upon through a plethora of books than the meta of any competitive video game has ever been. By the idea of this stale meta logic, chess should be the most boring competitive activity on Earth. Everybody at the top just plays book moves until move 25, right? Except nobody actually experiences chess that way at any level. A complete beginner sits down, plays e4, and has absolutely no idea they have just walked into one of the most heavily theorized opening moves in the history of the game, in the history of human thought, even. To them, it's their discovery, it's their game. The fact that a supercomputer, whether it be Stockfish or DeepMind or Deep Blue, somewhere has this position evaluated to 6 decimal places doesn't touch their experience at all. And here's the part that really matters. Even at the top level, the solved opening theory doesn't make the game stale. Because the moment both players step off the book, which happens constantly because humans are different, you are back in genuinely uncharted territory where human calculation and ingenuity, not memorized theory, decides the outcome. So, chess has a fully mapped region and a genuinely unmapped region coexisting in the same game, and players experience whichever one matches their level. Nobody needs to patch the bishop or the queen or the knight to keep it working. Same story, different sport. Soccer tactics absolutely have metas. Gegenpressing, positional play, the false nine, tiki-taka, parking the bus, haram ball, halal ball. At the elite level, these get studied, drilled, and countered with the same intensity as any esports draft phase. Coaching staffs spend hundreds of hours on an opponent's scouting, looking for exploitable patterns on how a team presses or builds out of the back. But take that same tactical knowledge and hand it to a Sunday League team. Tell them, press in a 4-4-3 with this trigger system, and it will not transfer. Not because they don't know what to do, you can write it on a whiteboard that they need to play in a 4-3-3, but because executing it requires years of collective training, fitness, spatial awareness, genetics, and chemistry that a recreational team simply doesn't have and isn't going to get. The pro game and the amateur game are, for all practical purposes, different games that happen to share a rulebook. A Sunday League match doesn't look like a Champions League match, and nobody expects it to, and nobody feels cheated by the difference. The solved tactics at the top stay at the top. They don't trickle down and poison the bottom because the bottom can't execute them anyway. I nearly forgot this was a video about video games. A bronze rank player in League of Legends, Valorant, Counter-Strike, Dota, whatever, and a pro player of the same game are playing the exact same game. They're playing on the same patch with the same items and the same map. And this is the key part, often the exact same build, because that build is sitting in a tier list, a build guide, a pro VOD, freely available the moment the bronze player is motivated enough to do so. There is no Sunday League version of League of Legends. There is only League of Legends, and whatever's optimal at the top is, within hours, common knowledge at every single rank below it. This is the actual difference. It's not that video games have more solved regions than chess or soccer. Arguably, they have far less, given how young these games are. It's that whenever something gets solved, it becomes instantly and universally available with zero transmission cost to every player at every skill level, regardless of whether they can execute it or even understand why it's correct. In chess, a beginner literally cannot replace grandmaster level calculation, guide or no guide. Their brain just can't run the position evaluation necessary. In soccer, an amateur team literally cannot replace professional pressing structures. Their bodies and training do not support it. In both cases, there is a natural firewall of sorts between what's optimal at the top and what's playable at the bottom, built out of raw human cognitive and physical limitation. Video games have almost no such firewall. The cognitive load of build this item, ward this bush, rotate at this timer is something that a motivated low-skilled player can copy almost immediately, even if they don't understand why it's correct. The information transfers perfectly, which means the moment the top of the game gets solved, that solution doesn't stay at the top, it floods downward into every single lobby instantly. Once you see the transparency problem, the meta is stale stops meaning what people think it means. It doesn't mean that the game has run out of interesting strategies. Chess hasn't run out of interesting strategies in 1500 years, with vastly less content than any video game. What it actually means is something closer to, the gap between what's optimal and what I'm currently doing has become common knowledge, and now I feel obligated to close that gap even though closing it isn't fun for me. That is not a content problem. It's something that cannot be fixed developer side. It's an information distribution problem. The game didn't get smaller, the amount of common knowledge about the game got larger, and because that knowledge transfers perfectly down the skill ladder, everyone, not just the top 1%, 0.1%, now feels the pressure of the solved way to play, whether they wanted that pressure or not. A bronze player who, 2 years ago, was happily building whatever felt fun is now playing a build they got from a tier list or one of the many websites that document the best builds, because not doing so feels like actively choosing to lose. The game is the same. It's just that their relationship to the game's information changed. Now, we can finally answer the original question honestly. Why do video games need patches when chess and soccer don't? Patches are the only tools developers have to manually reintroduce the information gap that chess and soccer get for free. Chess from the limits of human calculation, soccer from the limits of human training and physiology. A balance patch doesn't actually add content. What it does invalidate is the current common knowledge solution, forcing a temporary window where nobody actually knows what's optimal yet. For a few days or weeks after a big patch or a launch of a game, the game briefly has what chess and soccer have permanently, a gap between what's theoretically best and what's commonly known, because that gap hasn't been mapped and distributed yet. Then, the pros figure it out, and when the pros figure it out, the tier list updates. The information then propagates. At the speed of an YouTube upload, remember, because there is no firewall, and within a week or two, the new universally solved state is just as known as the old one it was. The gap closes again, and now the cycle requires another patch. This is why patches feel like a treadmill, because they are one. They are not building towards some final perfectly balanced state. They can't be, because the moment any state becomes knowable, it becomes known everywhere instantly. The patch isn't fixing the game, it's temporarily and artificially recreating the one condition, an information gap between optimal and common knowledge, that physical and cognitive limits give chess and soccer permanently for nothing. Of course, the unsatisfying punchline of this is that there is no version of this that gets completely solved. You could imagine a developer saying, fine, we'll just patch less, let the meta settle, the way that chess openings are settled. But settling is exactly the problem. The moment it settles, it's known. The moment it's known, it's everywhere. Tier lists, guides, pro VODs, within days, and then it's stale by the very definition we just established, except now there's no patch coming to disrupt it, so the gap closing pressure just sits there, permanently, for everyone, at every rank. Alternatively, you could patch constantly, which is the direction that most live service games have actually drifted, but then you're back to the original problem from a different angle. Every patch is new information that has to propagate and be relearned, and that relearning cost falls hardest on the players with the least time and least tolerance for it. The casual and new players who are already fighting the broader knowledge accumulation problem just to keep up with the game, let alone the patch notes. There is no patch cadence that escapes this because the underlying issue isn't the cadence. It's that video games are made of information that costs nothing to copy and nothing to distribute. And chess and soccer stability comes precisely from information that does cost something to copy, because copying it requires a human brain or human body to actually do the work. So, to circle back, does chess have a stale meta? In the sense that matters, no. Because solved openings don't transfer to the players who'd be bored by them, and unsolved positions remain unsolved for everybody who can't calculate them. Does soccer have a stale meta? No, for the same reason. Elite tactics don't transfer down to people who can't execute them. Do video games have a stale meta? Sort of, but stale isn't really the right word. The actual word I'm thinking of is transparent. Everything that can be known is known by everyone immediately, and patches aren't a creative tool for keeping the game fresh. They are a maintenance cost, the price of running a competitive activity inside a medium that has no natural mechanism for keeping anything secret, difficult, or slow to learn. Chess and soccer get that for free, built into biology. Video games have to manufacture it